The challenge, it may or may not be higher because we're in a rural area. I think there's limited access to the kinds of resources that many entrepreneurs on the Western Shore and in urban areas take for granted. That's not to say those are excuses, though. That it's just maybe harder to find the kinds of resources that are available. It may be that they're less visible, that they're hidden, kind of, but they still exist. And there's also a lot of resources from the Western Shore that are available to Eastern Shore entrepreneurs as well. So there's a lot that the state and the federal government does and local municipalities do to support entrepreneurs. But again, sometimes I think entrepreneurs use that as an excuse for not taking advantage of things. So they're there. The other challenge, I think, is the type of business. I think, again, most startups here on the shore traditionally, I think, have been lifestyle types of businesses, things that support the local economy, bakeries and restaurants and bars, and maybe buying a franchise and getting that started, a pet sitting service, those kinds of things. And those are all important and valuable businesses and services. I think what's traditionally been the challenge over here on the Eastern Shore and in the rural areas are more the high-tech, high-growth. And, again, there's that usual, what's the word I want to use? It's a usual complex that we have here on the Eastern Shore that a high-tech or high-growth business can't survive or exist here. And that's just not the case. And I think we see increasingly, especially from the younger entrepreneur, the ability to break out and start something that's a bit more high-tech, high-growth. And I guess maybe I should briefly tell you what I think the definition of that is, because it's different on the Eastern Shore. We often in the service provider arena for economic development, I think, use the word innovation, because I think innovation is a little more all-inclusive, and anything that's faster, better, cheaper is innovative, even in very traditional types of businesses. If it's something that allows you to set your business apart from your competition, it's innovative. You can wear that moniker and sort of hold yourself as part of that high-tech, high-growth. But yeah, high-tech's traditionally something that's really technical or digital or medical or scientific, but those are growing here on the Eastern Shore. Hot desks, in terms of its true definition, a lot of the larger companies, there were periods where they would let their employees work at home. And so what they would do is they would sort of rotate when the employee would come to the main place of business. And in order not to have to continue to add more space to their office, they would sort of designate 3 or 4 people to a given cubicle workstation, and what they would do is just rotate that same workstation as they're based on the day they would work at the home office. The rest of the time they'd be working at home. So that was where the term hot desk originated, and we're sort of playing off that a little bit by creating a network of co-working spaces. And for those unfamiliar with co-working, it's basically coffee house meets library. It's traditionally just a large room with lots of library type tables and chairs where entrepreneurs can sort of congregate on a regular basis in order to escape the isolation of working at home or working on the road, or just want to sort of gather with other like-minded entrepreneurs in order to bounce ideas, maybe have somebody peruse some work that they've done in order to get some feedback, maybe work on projects together. And so the space provides them the kind of internet access they need, free coffee and such, without forcing yourself to go to someplace like a coffee house or something where sometimes you may feel like you're overstaying your welcome if you don't keep buying coffee. And it's a little less public. And you've got, large whiteboard space, and so there's lots of ideation that can occur. But it's less about the space, and it's more about the network and the sense of community that develops among the entrepreneurs. Traditionally, I think the co-working space will attract more the type of entrepreneur that's a developer or a designer or a freelancer, someone who's more into doing computer work and writing code, that sort of thing, rather than maybe your traditional type of entrepreneur that's running a retail store. Not to say it's at the exclusion of that kind of entrepreneur, but it's really probably going to be more attractive to the more technical type of entrepreneur. Innovation doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be new, faster, cheaper, better. And so I guess you're referring to Hooper's Island Oysters down in Hooper's Island in Dorchester County. And what those guys are doing, not single-handedly, but I mean they're leading the way in totally revitalizing the oyster industry here in the state of Maryland. They are sort of part of the movement that's transitioning the oyster industry from its traditional gathering mode, where oystermen go out and gather what they can from oyster beds, and they're transitioning it into more of a farming activity, where it's a controlled environment, where it's sustainable. You're able to have a year-round inventory of product to sell, so it's a reliable income rather than seasonal or just based on weather or anything like that. But not only are they doing oyster aquaculture, but they've created some innovations which create efficiencies, which means they spend less time harvesting and processing their oysters in order to get them to market and so forth. And so they've gotten some support from the Maryland Technical Development Corporation because of some of the innovations they've done. They have a Maryland Industrial Partnership grant that they're working with the University of Maryland on in terms of sort of infusing salt into their oysters after they've harvested them, and in order to make them a little more flavorful and more interesting to the market. So they're doing all sorts of things that again are going to revamp the oyster industry, and it's one of Maryland's oldest traditional industries, and it has fallen on hard times, and it has great future now. What's going to make it easier for entrepreneurship? There's probably a lot of things. Some of the things that pop into my head, I think a greater recognition and appreciation on the part of our municipal governments of the role of entrepreneurship and its impact, positive impact on their respective local economies would be really helpful in terms of regulation, impediments. I'll just give you one quick example. Value-added producers, people who take agricultural products and then in some way improve them, whether it's jams, jellies, dressings, marinades, barbecue, whatever. Every county, there are state health laws, and they are sort of executed by the local county health department. And this isn't meant to be a criticism, but more of a realization and a recognition that not every county interprets the state health regulations the same way. So they therefore create different standards through their execution. And what you can do in one county, you may or may not be able to do in another county. So what I'm trying to say is there's no continuity in the way that the state health laws are implemented and executed. So what may be frustrating to one value-added producer in one county will be a different frustration in another county for another value-added producer. So again, regulations are just a real problem, and there's lots of debates we could have about whether we're over-regulating or not. I mean, there's a reason for certain regulations, and I think everyone has to acknowledge that. But, sometimes they're an excuse to get in the way of letting somebody be successful starting a business and being an entrepreneur. And that's what we ought to try to avoid.